Were you destined to be a lawyer? Was that something that was in your background? Was your family?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not at all. I was the first person on both sides of the family to graduate from college. And I really wanted to be a teacher. And I had a professor of law at Fredonia who thought it'd be a really good idea if I went to law school. And happened to mention it to my parents, and they decided it was a really good idea too. Well, lo and behold, I ended up getting a scholarship to Syracuse from the J. Russell Rogerson Scholarship Fund at Syracuse because he had been my grandparents' attorney 100 million years ago. And there it was. And all of a sudden, I get out of law school and pass the bar, and here I go.
Did you know you would be coming back here?
Pretty much. I had the family had inherited a lake house from the grandfather on my mother's side of the family that was estranged. So I had a place to live. I was married at that point in time and not a whole lot of money, and this seemed like a natural to come back here, so that's where I ended up.
Did you get a sense of how you entered the practice? Did you set up your own shop, or did you work with somebody?
I originally I'd worked for the city summers when I was in law school. My last year of law school, I worked for Stan Lundeen in the Urban Renewal Agency and did a lot of that stuff that led to the Brooklyn Square destruction. And I ended up going to work as a clerk for Ford, Lundeen and Gibb.
Okay.
That wasn't exactly a positive. And the day I got admitted to the bar, the next day I rented a space in the Fenton building, moved out, borrowed some money, bought a desk and a typewriter, and off I went. And Tubby Scarpino sort of became my mentor over there. His office was right next door to mine. And things went reasonably well, plus Mark Hampton hired me at City Hall, so I had some income and benefits, and then I hired a secretary, and she was my secretary for like 40 years, off and on. And when I retired, she didn't know what she was going to do, and I said, go work for Jeff Piazza. You don't want to do anything else. Well, lo and behold, she goes to work for Jeff, and the next year Jeff becomes family court judge, and Cindy ends up working as his secretary in Mayville, which was really great for her because suddenly she's in this great pay grade and wonderful benefits and the whole 9 yards. So that was good. And she's still working to this day.
Oh, that's terrific.
And oddly enough, she lives one street over from me.
So she can report in.
Yeah, now and then.
So you mentioned a couple of names of note. You're with Ford and Lundeen. That's Al Ford, Stan Lundeen, and Ron Gibb?
Yeah, Ronnie Gibb.
And did Stan at that time have political ambitions? Did you get a sense that that's what
Well, Stan was mayor at the time, so he'd already decided he had his political ambitions.
Got it.
And so I went to work over at City Hall with Stan as the mayor, and next thing we know, Stan runs for Congress. I'm there 2 years and Stan's gone. And I can remember going to Mayville and just bothering the heck out of Steve Carlson to run for mayor, and lo and behold, Steve did. And Steve was mayor for quite a while and a really good friend of mine, and we had a really good team back then.
Well, and you were there a tremendously long period of time. We'll get into that in just a second. Your mentor was Tubby Scarpino.
Yep.
Many people kind of react with chemistry. Anytime Tubby's name is mentioned, we all have our stories. Give me your best couple of Tubi Scarpino stories.
Oh, boy. There was the one I remember. Tubi was really hard on me. I mean, he made me toe the line, and if I had questions, you know, he'd get right in my face, and it was almost like going to the appellate division, you know, he'd be asking this and that. But the one story I'll never forget, Tubi had a camp up in Panama by the state forest. It was a very, very nice camp. And every summer, Tubi would have all the boys up for a stag. And I heard about it from Tubi every year, and son of a gun one day walks in, he says, "You're coming to the stag this year." He said, all these judges that he went to law school with are going to come down from Buffalo, and boy, you're going to have an opportunity to meet all kinds of really high-powered people. I said, "Great, Tubi." I get up there expecting to be a part of the stag. No, I was part of the wait staff. Here's an apron, here's a tray, you're serving everybody all day long. And that's how I met all these people. That's probably my favorite Tubi story. But every Christmas he'd bring the kids over Christmas Eve, and he'd give them each a card with a $2 bill in it and give me a bottle of bourbon, 10-year-old bourbon. And it was just a delight. He lived over on Lincoln Street, I think it was. And he was a character. We went to Buffalo. He decided that I needed to be admitted to the Western District Court. And he knew the clerk up there really, really well. They were buddies in college. And Tubi had gone to Canisius. So we go up there, and probably shouldn't even be telling you this Tubi story, but I got a brand new used car that I was so proud of, and we go up there and I get admitted and we have lunch and we're on the way back, and Tubi's got to go to the bathroom. I said, "Tubi, we're in the middle of the thruway. What am I going to do?" Lo and behold, he opens his bag and he pulls out a coffee can and proceeds to fill it in my car. I said, "Tubi, you spill one drop of this, you're walking home." I couldn't believe it, but yeah, that was Tubi. He was a character and a half.
So telling Tubi stories, John Plum was here just the other day, and John defended Tubi, and I talked about the camp in Panama when he had
Where he shot at the kids, yeah.
We had a camp in Panama also, so we were kind of very familiar with what was kind of going on at the time. How was Tubi's sense of humor during that? I mean, that was pretty...
That broke his heart. It really did. I mean, he was so really embarrassed by the whole thing and the press coverage. He was the associate city court judge at the time, and it really changed him a lot, I thought. Not for the good, sadly, but I said, "Tubi, what the heck are you thinking? Taking a shot at these kids?" But he had that camp broken into so many times, and he was just so angry about it all that. But yeah, Tubi'd call me up some nights and say, "I want to go out for a drink." And his brother had a place off of Washington Street, Scarpino's Bar and Grill or something. We'd go over there and he'd be telling war stories. And that's the other thing I remember about Tubi, is all his war stories about everybody Tubi and Mike Lombardo, and they'd be trying murder cases, and they'd be taking the trolley and going to Mayville and staying up at the William Peacock and getting drunk all night and trying the case in the morning, and those kind of things. You kind of blindsided me, but all of a sudden, all this stuff with Tubi's coming back. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll trigger some more stuff. I have a composite. I think the first one you appear, and I wondered if you, just as you look at this generally, Rick, you see a name, a story, a comment, reflection. Mm-hmm. I find that with the lawyers, things start popping when they see a picture or two. I'm
kind of looking at this beautiful girl named Cynthia next to this guy that looks like he's 10 years old in this picture. That would be you, of course. I see Lanny Sheffield. Lanny and I played Little League Baseball together before Lanny moved to Randolph. Trip Price, to this day, I think about Trip a lot now and then, and what a gregarious, fun guy he was. Jimmy Subject, I think he moved to Arizona. Everybody's too young in these pictures, I'll tell you. This is wrong. Charlie Beckstrom. I see Chuck a lot. He tends to frequent the same watering holes that I do from time to time, so I run into Chuck quite a bit, and he hasn't changed one little bit. Good guy. John Plum I used to see at the pub all the time, and absolute gentleman. Oh, there's my other mentor, Mark Hampton. I haven't seen Mark in forever. Oh, that was the phone. Tommy Flowers worked for me at City Hall. Oh, this is tough. A young Dave Stapleton, he grew up right up the street from me when we were kids. And dear old Ward Westerberg. Ward would come to Patillo's with his bride many evenings, and back then I would be at Patillo's for cocktail hour, and Ward would always come in, and they had a little brick out there, a sculpted brick that said Ward Cigar Holder, so I could leave it out there. I still see Sharon now and then. She comes into the Landmark quite a bit. Mr. Paul Webb graduated a year ahead of me at Syracuse. Don Lynn, rest in peace, had some issues. A young Chuck Hall. All right, that's enough of this, Greg.
Give me your best Lee Town Adams story.
Oh my God. I had a trial for the city. We were trying to get rid of Christy Bershone, the dog man of Chandler Street.
Yeah.
He had like 100 and some dogs. And Lee Town decided he wanted to do a on-site visit. And I said, Judge, you really don't want to do that. We're going. So I meet him down at the house, and he's got Bill Young with him. And he just goes in that house. I had overshoes on because I knew what was in there. I'd been in there once before. Old Lee, he goes, Judge Adams, I'm sorry, Lee. Judge Adams goes walking through that house like nothing ever happened, and he's looking here and he's looking there, and I get about as far as the kitchen, and the smell's overwhelming. And Bill Young grabs me and he says, don't worry, he said, the judge's old farm boy, none of this stuff worries him. So then the house burns.
Oh, really?
And now it's partially burned because Mr. Bershone was heating the place with a hairdryer in the dead of winter, and the hairdryer caught the bedding on fire, and he walked to the fire station to get help from Chandler Street. And so we're having this trial about demolishing the house because it was just, you can't even imagine what it was like. And I get a fireman testifying about the conditions of the house. Well, it seems that Mr. Bershone had used 30-gallon garbage bags to fill it up with dog feces, and he had them lined up the stairs. And the firefighter testified that he got to the top of the stairs and he put a boot through one of them, and he slipped and he went all the way down the stairs just covered in this mess. Judge Adams starts laughing uncontrollably. So we get done with the trial, and I go to leave, and the court officer says the judge wants to see you in chambers. So I go into the chambers, and he's got this big grin on his face. He's still laughing. He says, whatever you do, he says, I want you to get a transcript, and I want you to send me the pages of that testimony. Okay, Judge. Oh, he was terrific. I had so much respect for him. He was just a judge's judge as far as I was concerned, and there was no nonsense in his courtroom. And the first trial I ever had in his courtroom, I'm sitting at the counsel table asking questions while seated, and he went nuts, and I never ever did that again.
Oh, yeah.
But what a great guy. A genius, too, just absolutely brilliant on the law.
You got into the city, of course, you know, Rick Sotir, City Corporation Council, I mean, that goes glove in hand. And I had always heard, and I might be wrong about this, but that the Corporation Council had to have owned real estate in Jamestown.
Correct.
And Mark Hampton wasn't a city resident, but
Right.
that there was a lot
Right.
that would be transferred to get that qualification. Is that urban legend or is that reality?
That's reality. And Mark lived in Lakewood, and he had this lot because the charter provided that you had to have a practice in Jamestown, and you had to own property in Jamestown. Didn't say you had to live here. Well, as Lakewood, my plan was always to get out of Lakewood as quick as I could and get back to Jamestown. But my parents had a house in Jamestown, and across the street was a city-owned lot. So I bought it. And they used it for parking guest cars and stuff, and when I was a kid, we used to play football over there with the neighbors. And so that was my lot. And I never transferred it. As a matter of fact, I didn't sell it till I retired.
Yeah.
The neighbor that adjoined the lot wanted it, and so I sold it to him for basically next to nothing to get rid of it, and that was that. But absolutely true story. Had to own property in the city and have office for the practice of law.
Well, I'd heard that, and I'm good. I'm glad to confirm that. So now you are in Corporation Council. Mark Hampton was your first boss at
Right.
the Corporation Council.
Right.
And he was brought in by Stan?
Yes.
And as I recall, and this is, boy, my distant memory, but Stan was finding people to be part of his cabinet, his group, that really, not politically, he wanted the best of the best. I mean, he really went out and got a blue ribbon group of people, notwithstanding their politics.
Absolutely the truth. Those city councils were incredibly bright people. You had Miles Lasser on there, I remember, and Lucy Alpaw, and Warren Erickson was on there. I'm talking about the council. Warren was obviously from the other side of the aisle, but in that regard, Stan picked people to run for city council and for his cabinet that were really bright folks from all different sectors, and I thought it was really neat. I mean, it was a great time to work for the city, and it was under Steve Carlson too. It really was.
Is that how he recruited Chuck Hall too?
Yeah, that's how he recruited Chuck.
In Philadelphia, I think he was, wasn't he?
I think so. And Chuck came back to be the finance director, and it was just a really neat team, and everybody got along. Jim Pullen was the head of the BPU, and oh God, John Claypool was the DPW director, short little guy. John Palladino was chief of police. John was another great guy who got me out of a lot of trouble from time to time, I can tell you that. There were some really good folks over there to work with. It was very nice.
One of the things that I affiliate you, Rick, with is your relationship you had in negotiating the contracts with the Expos at the time, because we had the relationship with that. Tell some stories about that, because that's a piece of our history that I'm not sure we know a lot about.
That, after I got your phone call last night, and by the way, Thursday's a bad time to call me, it's Men's Day at the club, but anyway, that experience just jogged my memory last night about all the neat times I had when the Expos came to town and we negotiated the lease for the stadium, and had to mess around with the concessions, and Rich Ruggiero had the concessions, and who was going to get a piece of the gross, and all this kind of other stuff, and the cost of lighting that thing was like about $1,800 a game. But I thought we had a very fair and reasonable lease, and apparently the Expos did too. And through that process, I met Pat Doherty, who was the manager. He came back like every summer. And I remember when they'd come in for their 2 or 3 day training before the season started, I'd blow out of City Hall and go down to College. It was College Stadium then,
Yeah.
and I'd look up Pat, and we'd start BSing about this and that and the other thing, and Bob Gebhardt was the pitching coach, big guy, and Jim Fanning was heavily involved, and so I met Jim, an absolute gentleman, and I spent a lot of time talking with Jim about different players because I had coached Babe Ruth baseball and these local kids, and talking to Pat Doherty about it. Pat Doherty told me something I'll never forget. He said, this kid can be a superstar when he's 16 years old, but we don't even look at them till they're at least 17, because a lot of the 16-year-old kids go, and the ones blossom after 16. But I had some great times with Doherty.
Did you?
Oh, jeez. I was down there quite a bit, and it got to the point where I'd see him when they were doing their warm-ups and stuff, and Pat would go, and we'd just gone through the renovation of the stadium, and come on down to the locker room. Okay, great. So I go in there with Pat, and no sooner do I sit down than some guy walks in with a case of beer. And have a beer, and Pat grabs a beer, and now he's calling in the stats to the I think it was Jim Fanning at that time, the minor league operations. And one night, and this became kind of a regular thing, it was kind of fun to sit there and Pat would be talking about the game and analyzing the game, and one night the Yankees came, the Annaville Yankees, Oneonta Yankees came to town. And so the usual routine, I come down to the locker room afterwards, we have a couple of beers, and Pat says, we're going to the pub. We'll get something to eat, have another beer, you get to meet somebody. So we walk in the pub, and I can still remember where I was sitting, because sitting right next to me was Joe Pepitone.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. I got home late. I got in trouble because I got home really late, but I couldn't stop talking with Joe Pepitone about the Yankees, and that was wonderful. And then one day I'm down there, and Pat has me paged. He says, you got to come with me. I said, come with you? You got a game starting in half an hour. He says, you got to come with me. They had the players staying at the Woodlawn Motel, and one of the players did not show up for whatever. So Pat's got me in tow and Gebhardt, and we go over to the Woodlawn Motel. And Pat gets the guy to unlock the room, and we hear the shower running, and there's one of his players in the shower with some girl.
Oh, God. Just before the game.
Just before the game. Doherty went absolutely crazy. I'm laughing like Gebhardt's almost on the floor. He's laughing. Doherty is fit to be tied. Just, a little fiery him. Oh, it was super. Those are some of the great memories down there of those guys.
Well, Pat was a storytelling, everybody's talked about that. And, just a machine. And by the way, we're trying to get him back here.
Are you really?
Yeah, he's in Colorado, and he was going to come back if we didn't have this COVID thing going on.
The other day it was a while ago, I was kind of cleaning out a closet, and my mother, for some odd reason, had kept this huge scrapbook of all my achievements, and I'd never really looked at it. And I got to talking to George Carlo.
Yep.
I'd met George over at the old Hometown Grill, and we got to talking, and when Jim Fanning's son was going to be the GM of the Tarp Skunks. I said, God, George, it's the funniest thing. I said, I was going through this scrapbook the other day, and there I am at the Red Coach, in a motel room at the Red Coach Inn with Jim Fanning and me, because Jim was in town and he was going to sign the lease for the coming season. It was like February. And it was me and Jim Fanning and Russ Dietrich and Tony Raffa and Ray Engel. We're all in this group shot that the Journal took of this lease signing in this motel room at the Red Coach. Nothing nefarious, we were just signing the lease. So.
A little better place.
Oh, man. those are some good times with those guys. I was sad when the Expos ended up not being there.
Did you find that as in the least progress, sometimes it was more than just the Expos. Sometimes it was Major League Baseball because they had certain requirements of the stadium. Did you get involved in trying to sort out how that worked?
That was one of the angrier parts of dealing with that issue, was all this nonsense that we had to provide for these 18, 19-year-old kids that had to meet certain major league standards, and that really kind of led to the whole renovation of the stadium, because I don't know if you recall, but it used to, when it rained, the locker rooms would it'd come right through the floor, and but we had to have this certain slopes and grass and all this major league stuff for little old Jamestown, and it was expensive. There's no question about it. But back in the day, we had an excellent groundkeeper. I wish I can't recall his name now, but
Tim Kassler?
Yeah, Tim Kassler. We were down there. He was down there morning, noon, and night doing all this stuff to keep the thing going. And then we had to have new lighting because the lighting wasn't bright enough, and all that sort of nonsense. But yeah, it was challenging, to say the least, that we went through these kind of expenses. And the sad part was that when we lost the jammers, and all of a sudden all I could think of was all this work we put into this place, everything about the stadium. Really a very first-class facility for a city this size, concession stands, the whole 9 yards, and all of a sudden they're off to Wheeling, West Virginia or whatever. Sad.
Well, because of that, though, the good news, the Perfect Game Collegiate Baseball League, that gentleman, Mike Zimmerman, came in here. He could have gone any place, chose here because of the stadium, which ultimately led now to them donating it to a community baseball LLC, which is what we have now.
Right.
When you were talking about the baseball, did you find yourself in awkward positions where some of the players may have shown less discretion that are more of a criminal nature, and your corporation counsel, and of course the complaint may come to the city police? Was there much, if any, of that?
Never had a problem, because that organization was so first class that if something happened, that kid was gone, period, done. It wasn't like, take care of this, or gee, I got a kid in jail, can you help us out? I think that's what you'd be referring to. None of that ever happened. It was always, I might get a call from Pat or Jim Fanning that, they have this problem, and this kid's out of here. We're sorry if there's any charges, place them. They made them toe the line.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Corporation counsel, you get involved in everything, soup to
I
nuts.
did.
And it's a business. Most people don't fully appreciate that it's a huge business, and the city corporate counsel is in fact a general counsel, as if he's running General Motors. Now we're into the war story part. Whether there are some things as you're. How long were you corporation counsel, first of all?
26 years, 27 years, something like that.
I mean, that'll be never.
Yeah, wrote a lot of laws that are now state laws, and back then we represented the college, the hospital, the transit system, all of course gone, or gone in different places. We negotiated all the union contracts. We never ever hired outside legal counsel unless it was like something involving a federal court in Albany or whatever. We had a couple of firefighter cases. But we did everything in-house. I did one of 4 annexations that were successful in the history of New York State. And now they're trying to annex something that's not even contiguous to the city line. And they keep throwing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was making $38,000 a year and did it all in-house and won.
Yeah.
We got 7 acres of land that's pretty much still vacant because after we went and did all these battles, the guys that wanted to build houses decided they didn't want to build it.
Yeah.
It's still there. It's part of the city. Fran Morgan, she hated Steve Carlson with a passion. She was the town of Ellicott supervisor. How can you do this? What are you doing for these people? You got no services out there. You have no infrastructure. We can develop a tax base, you know. But yeah, there's only been 4 in the history of the state, and somebody gets it in their head that we're going to proceed with it.
Yeah.
Read the case law. It's somewhere. The whole file is somewhere on the 5th floor of City Hall, buried in the archives. And that one really lights my fire because we did everything. I tried cases. I was in the appellate division. Now, every time I pick up the newspaper, they're authorizing another couple $100,000 for somebody to go do something that we did in-house.
Yeah.
And they wonder why they got a problem over there with the tax rate gone through the ceiling. But the other thing is, we never in the history of the city of Jamestown, till Sam Teresi became mayor, was there ever final and binding arbitration. Ever. We always worked it out. Sam Nalbone was the head negotiator, and we always worked it out. I am convinced that Sam forced arbitration because then when the police and fire got these huge salary increases, he could blame the arbitrator.
Yeah.
Wasn't his fault. And that, to this day, we always found a way to resolve it. Sometimes we went right to the edge, but we always resolved it, ever. And that's the other thing I did. I negotiated all labor contracts from the DPW to the police to the fire. Now, let's hire this guy, let's get this guy, and then we pay the corporation council $90,000 plus a year.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But
During your tenure, who were your associate counsel?
there was Tom Flowers and Jim Subject and Don Lynn. Tom was there the longest. And then Jim came in, and Jim and I we really worked well together. And Jim was a good lawyer, you know. He got in that issue with the police that night, and but I just wanted Jim there, and I kind of dug in my heels against the powers what be in the political scheme of things. And Jim was there, and went on to be a hell of a good district attorney. Really good. And that was nice because I could work with Jim on certain issues that we would do. And then Don Lynn came in, and I think Don and I left at the same time. I don't think there was anybody after Don that I can recall. Every now and then the rotten spots take over, but I think Don was the last one I had. And then when Dick Kimball lost the election, the state, to my undying gratitude, offered early retirement, which I took, which was of a great benefit to me at that time because I was going through a divorce and all that kind of nonsense. And fortunately, my daughter was in her last semester of college, so it all worked out. I'm very happy. Been retired 7 years, and I haven't looked back a day. And I think I've maybe had 2 days where I was bored.
Yeah.
It's just, I cook. I don't like to eat. I eat to live. I don't live to eat. But I cook a lot of stuff, and then I give it away. And I got people all the time, when are you going to make this? When are you going to make that? And I started out, it was kind of after the divorce that I said, you know what, if you can read, you can cook. And I started reading, and then I'd start improvising. And then Junior Ciancio was talking about his spaghetti sauce that his mother got from her mother from Sicily. And I said, well, you got the recipe? And he gave me the recipe. And so I make the old Italian, 8 hours of stirring.
Yeah.
And I have a chili recipe that one of my dear friends, he's always calling me. It's the middle of August. When are you going to make chili? I said, it's 90 degrees out. I can't do it. But I do soups and chili and pasta sauces and pot roasts and some dishes my grandmother used to make, brought from the old country, and I've kind of figured them out as to how to do it. And then when my mom when in the nursing home, I got her entire card file of recipes, half Albanian and half Swedish. And so I can make some mean different dishes. And the first try never quite works out. But the good thing about it is I can always throw it away and there's AJ's up the road.
I know the feeling. Exactly.
I mean, the one thing that always pops up is that annexation, because it was so difficult and yet so challenging and interesting, and so much research went into it. The other one was the sale of the General Hospital, which was a horrible, horrible time. And there was that crazy clause in the will that Arsenio Jones left. And I'm in the office till 10, 11 at night doing all this research, and we finally prevailed, and we went to the appellate division, I believe, if I recall correctly, and we won there. And the people that were so adamant about retaining that hospital, which was hemorrhaging like $5,000 a week in losses, and people would call up, how dare you, it's a city-owned hospital, I can get my health care free there. No, you can't. That kind of stuff. But what do you have there now? You have cancer treatment center, you have adolescent psych, you have all the things the city would never have. But for the purchase of that, and actually, when it was all said and done, the city made next to nothing on its sale, because there was so much debt that had to be covered. The ambulance service that they decided would run to save the hospital. That was a really difficult time, and Steve Carlson paid the political price for it.
You and I were involved in that, and
Yeah.
of course the WCA Hospital, and of course it was Murray and Steve.
Right.
Kind of
Right.
worked out the
Right.
you know, about it, and the whole litigation subsequently, and I kind of forgot about it. But yeah, that was huge, and such a major decision that Steve, ultimately it was Steve's call.
Yep.
I mean, and the right call under the right circumstances, but politically, my God.
Yep. The powers what be aligned, and the next thing you knew, you had Don Alstrom as mayor. But the other thing I look back on, and one of the things that really was tough was all the kids I represented, and the ones that became successes, and some of them still actually drop me a card, what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. One of the worst cases I had was being involved in the Corey Anderson disappearance, and the trials that I went through thereafter against the alleged, well, I guess let's put it this way, the kid's dad was a person of interest, and those trials were brutal. And fortunately, we had a judge come down from Niagara County, Sarah Sapienza, I can't remember what her new name is, she got married again. One of the most no-nonsense judges I ever had, and I love no-nonsense judges. None of the BS, none of the warm cuddlies, it was all just right down the middle. And then occasionally I'll pick up the newspaper and see one of the kids I represented on their way to state prison. You know, there were 3 or 4 of them, and I told them, if you didn't straighten up, this is what your destiny would be, and sure enough, that's what it was.
And this was as a law guardian? Did you?
Yeah, it was a law guardian mostly. I was the first law guardian in the county.
Yeah.
Lynn Hartley started the program before it became memorialized in the state thing. Lynn wanted somebody, and Lynn and I were close friends and both Syracuse grads, and I used to pal around a lot with Lynn when he was a lawyer, and worked on his campaign when he decided to run for county court or family court judge. And he had this idea, and then at the time I was I think president of the Boys and Girls Club. Maybe it was before I became president, but we had kind of a liaison where we could do supervised visitations and stuff at the Boys and Girls Club, so kids would have a place to go to at least see their parent that wasn't allowed to be with them or visit with them. And that's how the thing, and then the thing kind of blossomed. I was a law guardian for like 40 years. One of the reasons I retired, by the way, when the state made me take 6 additional hours of CLE to be a law guardian, and I was teaching classes for law guardians. That was really crazy. They call
Did they
me.
give you credit for that?
Oh yeah, they'd give me like 1 credit, but I still had to get the other 5, and it was crazy. What you want me to teach a course on, conflicts and ethics between what the kid wants and what's in his best interest and this kind of nonsense, and this is nonsense. This is crazy. And I came home with a couple of trials where the child had been murdered, and I was just so depressed. I'll never forget the one trial we had a medical examiner from Erie County come in to testify to this two-year-old child's injuries. There's something like 35 or 36 injuries, all of which could have been fatal. And then we saw the autopsy pictures, which were horrendous. And we all went home. There were 5 lawyers on the case, and the next morning, it was a Friday morning, and every one of us was hungover. We just all went home and really got blasted. It was just so horrendous. And it started, as time passed, I used to say it's unbelievable what parents or adults do to children. And what I saw in this little bitty county, and one can only imagine Erie County or New York City or Rochester, I saw horrendous things. I saw autopsy pictures of a little girl that mom boiled her in a bathtub. It looked like the kid's body was like a lobster. That stuff kind of, you don't get used to it.
No.
They say cops get used to this stuff. No, cops end up like I do, getting kind of angry at the world by seeing this. Just horrible. Just horrible, horrible stuff. But if I could, make a difference for a kid, that's what I tried to do all the time. I used to say kids are people too. They're not property. They're not a source of a check. They're people. And you ought to love them instead of fighting all the time about who's going to see them on Christmas and who's going to see them on Christmas Eve. And the worst weeks of my life were like from December 1st through Christmas. Everybody else is ho, ho, ha, ha, decorate, buying stuff, da-da. What am I getting? Phone calls because you're not getting them for Christmas Eve kind of attitude. And right away, it's the order to show cause, and now we got to go up there, and then you get a call Christmas Eve. Well, she didn't obey the order. I'm not getting the kid anyway. Well, what do you want me to do about it? But right away, the stress hits you again. So I'm very happy now not to be there. Not to be there. I miss the guys. I really, truly miss the court security guys up there, the retired cops. They took really good care of me because I didn't look at them as servants. We'd talk about these different people and war stories and stuff, and they were just wonderful guys. Rennie Nelson, who finally pulled the pin. I think he was 80 years old when he finally walked out of the court security business. But Bob Becker, who passed away, there was one guy that kept threatening to kill me every time we went to court, and Bob would walk me to the parking lot and tell this other guy he better be going the other way, he was going to jail. And just all those guys were...
Remember Moose?
Oh God, Moose. Oh geez, do I remember Moose. Those guys were great. Gary Jambrone up there, got Lou Snyder, who passed away, very young. I mean, I graduated from high school with Lou's brother, Stu, and he was a great guy. All the court officers were just wonderful to work with, and I really miss them. Some of the lawyers, not so much. But I thought I got along with 99% of them, and then there was the 1% I don't think anybody else got along with either. It was just one of those things. It's the nature of the beast, but it's the same in medicine. I play golf with a guy that I play golf with a couple of doctors now, retired, and they tell me the same thing. Some guys they just could not deal with or work with. So.
As you're coming in today, or thinking about last night, what's a question you expect that I would ask and I haven't asked yet?
I had no clue. None at all. I was quite intrigued. I played golf early this morning, and I figured you probably wouldn't be in the office, and I'm driving home, and I got you on the phone, and what the hell am we going to do here?
Well, this is fun. it's an opportunity, and what I find fascinating is that, the recollection of the Lee Town Adams and the Joe Riccatas, and at the time, the city court judges was Alessi, right? Was yours?
Yeah, it was, Lester Berglund was just going out and Sam Alessi was coming in.
Okay.
And when I moved over on Euclid Avenue, Sam Alessi was the neighbor that lived on Chestnut right through my backyard.
Okay.
And Sam always took a liking to the little kids running around there, my kids, and we'd talk over the fence. And one night, I'll tell you one Sam Alessi story I'll never forget. Sam had a pilot's license. And Sam said, I got to go to Dunkirk for something at the airport. And he says, you want to go? What the heck? Yeah, I'll go. Nothing to do. So off we go from Jamestown Airport and Sam's little plane, and he lets me take the controls a little bit, and I love flying anyway, and this is wonderful. We land in Dunkirk, he does what he's got to do, we're coming back to Jamestown. And Sam, he's chattering away, and I'm sitting there in the second seat, and Sam's chattering away and chattering away. And he says, we're on approach to Jamestown now, and all of a sudden he goes, me, 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 me. Sam, what the hell's that? Oh, I forgot to put the landing gear down. I said, I'm not flying with Sam anymore.
You were an attorney for Democrats, for Republicans, while there was change of administration, and always you were subject to the will
Right,
of the
right,
mayor.
right.
And as you think about from Stan to Steve to Don Ahlstrom to
Dick Kimball.
Carolyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Carolyn, was she?
I always took the position, and if they didn't like it, too bad, but my legal opinion was way more important to me than what the ruling powers wanted it to be. I used to remember Stan Lundeen, I go, Stan, you can't do that. He goes, the easiest thing for a lawyer to say is no. And, I just called him as I saw him. And then when Carolyn Seymour got elected, before she's sworn in, we're in a work session, and they're talking about allowing sliding at Stadium Hill without supervision. And they looked at me and I said, no, you really can't do that, because if it's a city facility and you allow this, there was one kid that had already been killed on a toboggan down there. There's other kids with broken legs and stuff. They build these jumps and they go over them. I said, with no supervision, you're opening yourself up to big time issues. And even with supervision, it better be good, because it's inherently dangerous. And, I'm worried about the liability problem, because who gets to defend them? And Carolyn went nuts. I can't believe you're going to deny the youth of this community. Well, that was that. That's all it took. See you later. Bye. But
So that was the time period that you then...
Well, then I was out for a year and a half because I was a holdover. No, she kept appointing these people that were not qualified. They were pure political people,
right.
And she kept doing that, and so I kept hanging in there in the council. And then Jimmy Subject said he'd take it. I said, great. Jimmy's fine. I'll leave the office in good hands, but I wasn't going to leave it to these people that were just going to.
Right.
And so that's what happened. And then Dick Kimball ran for mayor, and I was right back in the saddle. But you can't go back. Once I went back there, it wasn't nearly the challenge or the fire in the belly, so to speak. Dick Cole became the finance director, and Dick and I had a great working relationship. And Dick had a problem employee, and he calls me down because he wanted a witness when he fired her. So I went into Dick's office, and I'm sitting there. It's after lunch. He can send her in. She comes in. She walks up. Yes. Dick Cole looks at her and says, Rick has something he wants to tell you. I had to go to Steve Carlson sent me up to the General Hospital to fire Bob Hoffman, and gosh, I hated it. I hated doing it, even if it was the right thing to do. All I could think of was that poor person's now going home unemployed, and from a decent job with benefits and all that. So that part I never liked. Fortunately, I didn't have to do it very often. It was even hard in my own private practice to do it, but do what you got to do sometimes.
You left corporation counsel, then went back to private practice. Was that hard? Was that a hard transition?
Not really. I had, plenty of work to do, plenty of stuff to keep me busy. It was the hard transition was watching all the things that we had put together over the years at the city just get torn down, ridiculous changes in the charter. I thought the city charter was written by geniuses, how everything interacted, and all of a sudden they're changing this thing, that thing, the other thing. You really don't want, it's like messing with the Constitution. You don't want to keep doing that because it really it has unintended consequences. The people that wrote that and the legislature that approved it in 1923 were really bright people. Really, really, really bright people. And that charter was, I thought, a really good document. And they started messing with it and changing this. And that was the hard part, not being in City Hall and watching these things happen. And I'd make my proverbial call to Bill Galati, and you really shouldn't be doing this. And it was like Sam just waved his wand and it passed. It was that kind of stuff. So, is what it is. We're here. We're at our tax limit. They can't raise my taxes anymore. It's the thing of beauty.
This has been great, Rick. On short notice, I thank you very much.
Hey, you're driving me nuts here with throwing these questions. Do you really do this for a living? My God. It felt like I was sitting down with Mike Wallace or something. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity really to serve. I worked with some really, really, really good people and really good policemen.